Hey guys, welcome back. This is essentially going to be a how-to tutorial to replace your standing rigging by yourself or with one other. Do it all with the mast still in place. So essentially we're going to be taking the shrouds off and the stays off one by one and replacing them and putting them back up. There's going to be 8 steps to this and they're all pretty simple. I use Sta Lok fittings. I decided to go with Sta Lok. I think I had Norseman on the boat originally and decided to go with Sta Lok. Norseman is out of business or was going out of business, so I decided to go with the most popular ones, which was Sta Lok fittings. Ones I could get anywhere in the world and ones which were super simple. So this is a step-by-step guide essentially on how to do it all by yourself. Okay, the first step one is mast steps and gear to go up and down the mast by yourself. To go up and down the mast by myself, I used a separate line. I didn't actually use the lines that were there because all of my lines are running up and into the mast and down, and I didn't want to tie a line onto those lines and pull them full out so I could check them and make sure they were all good. I just don't like the idea of half of the rope being hidden inside the mast, and so I have no idea what's going on there. This thing's holding your life. So what I did was I used one of the lines as I climbed up and I set my own little line in here and I just choked it off around the very top of the mast, and then that was my climbing line onto there. Okay, so the system that I used, a little bit of info. I've got an arborist background, tree surgeon by trade. So this is essentially my bread and butter, like ropes and rigging and harnesses and forces and the directions and pulleys and all that kind of stuff. So this is all second nature to me and it's all good, but I'll quickly run you through what I was using. So like I said, I set my line up the top with it choked up the top. So I had my own separate line that I didn't have to worry about, that I knew that was good. Mast steps to run up and down the mast is almost a given. I ended up going, how many times? I think it was about 30 times. I have 9 different stays on this boat and I ended up going up and down the mast about 30 times. Definitely went up and down more than what I probably needed to, just because it was so easy. It was just easier for me to go up, take off one, come down, do it, put it back up, rather than sort of try and minimize the amount of times I was going up and down the mast by like taking 2 off at a time or something like that. So I'm just going to show you the gear that I've got to go up and down a single line. This bit of gear is from the tree climbing industry and it's called a rope wrench, and it needs to be used in conjunction with a friction device. I would recommend, instead of going something like this, which has lots of little moving parts and I don't think is very good for a salty environment, I would go a little micro pulley and a little friction hitch, probably it's called a Valdotrens or something like that. What you basically need is this rope wrench comes with this part here, and then that's connected to a friction hitch, and I'll show you a picture of that, of what it looks like, just so that I'll get off the internet. It's connected to a friction hitch, and then I have just a little bungee cord that actually goes around my neck here, and that pulls my system up. So it literally pulls it up the rope as I go up the rope. So it's as simple as that. And then to come down with your friction hitch, you're literally pulling the hitch down, and as it pulls down, it pulls this whole system sort of down like that. The rope's actually slipping now, but this system slides up and down the rope. And I had it so I would run up the mast and my little lanyard here would pull it all the way to the top. And then I had a pole belt. I'll show you a picture of a pole belt that I'll get off the internet as well. And the pole belt, the easiest way to make that adjustable is a little tiny micro pulley and another sort of friction hitch. I think the best one to use there is they call it a distal. Yeah, so that's the cheapest way, because you can make a friction hitch here and buy a micro pulley. Micro pulley in Australia is like 50 bucks. And you buy like the 8, 9, 10 mil cord, probably 8 to be honest. You can just buy 2 meters of 8 mil rope. Good double core rope, and then just make your own little friction hitch and just tie off the ends, you know. So you don't have to buy this thing here costs like $300-400, you know. You don't have to do that. You can do the same thing with about 50 or 60 bucks. This one here you're probably going to need if you want to do it like I've done. There are so many different single rope devices that will let you go up and down the rope with the one device. From the climbing industry, I know there's a thing called a Kimbo and a rope runner. Yeah, there's many things that you could do. Or you could really go up the mast and set yourself a little pulley and climb double rope, so your rope's going up through the pulley and down to your thing. There's many ways of doing it, and I recommend, yeah, like I said, I recommend for the easiest and most safe and most reliable, I would go rope wrench with a self-made friction hitch here out of 8mm cord, and also a micro pulley. Obviously you're going to need carabiners and stuff like that. Then for your harness, you obviously have a harness on the boat already, but if you want to go El Cheapo or you've got one lying around, rock climbing harnesses are always very comfortable. They've got a couple of little loops hanging off them that you can hang a little bag for your tools and stuff like that. Just know that if you're going to use a rock climbing harness, those harnesses are designed to not have that much load on them when you fall, because the shock out of the climbing rope is quite, it's got a lot of elasticity, about that 10%, I think, and so that takes all the shock out of it. So the harness doesn't need to be too beefy. That's why they're so small and so comfortable. So if you're using one of those, or any harness basically, you don't want to ever put that under shock load. So it's always got to be tight and cinched up, and so you can't fall at all. I can't imagine going up and down the mast 20 or 30 times and having someone to winch me up every single time. That would be very uncomfortable and very painful for everyone involved. I don't honestly think I would replace my standing rigging if I didn't have mast steps and a safe way for me to go up and down the mast all by myself without having to rely on anybody else. You also might need extra ropes and or pulleys. Pulleys you probably got on the boat already. Ropes you've already probably got on the boat already. I use these to guy off. So if I was taking out like the outer shrouds or the cap shrouds or whatever they're called, when I took those off, I put another rope up the top of the mast and cinched that up with a pulley to a winch to have a little bit of extra support on the mast. Step 2 is go up and check and write down everything that you need. How I did this was I actually took my phone up, I took a picture of the fitting, and then whilst I was up in the air, I would edit the little photo on the picture, and I would draw and point to all the little measurements. So I had a little calipers up there, and I would measure all the little bits that I needed, and like the pin lengths, the pin diameter, the hole diameter, because I had no idea what I was doing before this. I didn't know if these were standard holes or what. So I just need to make measurements of everything up there with a photo and diagram, so I could go back and I knew what I was talking about. And then after I made a list of everything that was in the air and everything that was on deck, I took that all back and I did like a couple of days, a day or a couple of days of just trying to find all these bits in good quality 316 and as cheap as possible. Yeah, so I think in all the bits ended up costing about 5 or 6 grand Australian, about 5 grand, 5.5. And considering the actual stainless steel wire that I used, the ones that I used was 1x19, and that refers to the configuration of the actual wire strands. The actual wire was only like about 1.5 grand. So I gone with Sta Lok fittings, and let's just say in 10 years or 7 years or whenever it's supposed to be replaced, I have still got this boat. Well, then I am pretty confident I should be able to do it all again and reuse the fittings again and just change tiny little they're called formers in the wedge inside the actual Sta Lok fittings. So when I need to do this again, if prices were exactly the same as they are now, it might only cost me another $1.5 grand, a little bit more than that, like 1.6, just to redo it all again. Which is, yeah, so it was quite expensive outlay because I was changing from the old fittings that I couldn't replace anymore to Sta Lok fittings, which hopefully will be around for the indefinite future. Yep, step 3 is just putting up a guy rope if you need it for the one that you're taking off. Pick your day that you're going to go do this. The 3 days that I did this, one of the days when I took off the cap shrouds, oh my god, that mast was bending so much. And the whole mast was wobbling like this. It was not for the faint-hearted because it was so windy up there and it was making everything move. In hindsight, I mean, everything worked out. I definitely thought I was going to die a couple of times, but yeah, in hindsight, when you're doing those upper ones or anything up higher, I would wait till a pretty still day to do it because that was pretty scary. With the mast, man, it bends so much. I had no idea how much it actually bends, and there was massive gust of wind coming and it's bending over like this, and I'm on top of there looking down to like the outer edge of the boat, and yeah, it was it was pretty unnerving. Yeah, so step 4 was just take off the particular shroud that you're doing. So I did these in order of easiest to hardest because I had no idea what I was doing at the start. I didn't know how difficult it was going to be. It's very easy. Actually, logistically is where you'll run into problems, and or if you can't get off any fittings up the mast or something like that, which we did. But actually the actual Sta Lok fittings and the actual fittings that you're using are probably pretty simple. There's not much going on there, and it's not rocket surgery, and they're designed for laymen to put them on. So if you're worrying about the actual fitting of the Sta Lok components, don't be worried about that at all. Yeah, they are super simple. Yeah, so that was by far the easiest part of the whole thing. Yeah, so I was marking the turnbuckles up with tape, so if I needed to put them back on, I knew how much to do them up, and then I loosened it all off, took off the particular stay, and then because I wasn't using the same fittings, I didn't have to do the measurement of how long the original stay was. Initially, you might need to do that, but it's pretty simple to work out. But I was just, with my new wire and my new Sta Lok fittings, I would put the upper end on, whatever that one's called, and I would do it as per the instructions, obviously. But I was marking the actual, I was marking every 10 centimeters for about 100 mil on the actual wire. So when I attached the fitting up the top and did it up to the correct tightness, I could see, based on my markings, how much wire was disappearing inside the actual stay fitting, and then from that I used that measurement on the one below. Let's just say it's a 10 mil wire, so up on the one, the 10 mil wire was disappearing, like I think like 60 mil, 66 mil, and so on the one below I could tell that the wire was going to disappear into the fitting 66 mil. So I'd do the fitting up and I'd put it at 66 mil, and that's how I'd get my exact measurement correct with the old stay. So how you want to get your measurements right, there's plenty of ways to skin that cat, and it's not too hard for you to work out. This little bit here is going to be obviously Sta Lok specific because I use Sta Lok, but all the fittings would be pretty similar. The Sta Lok fittings are so simple. The instructions that I'm going to show you here actually have writing on them, but the instructions that I had that came with my fittings didn't have any instructions on them at all. Yeah, they were basically the IKEA of stainless steel fittings. There was just there was 6 pictures and that's it, and nothing else. So that shows you just how simple these are. So this next little bit here, I'll just run through Sta Lok specific fittings. So I was cutting the wire to the exact length that I needed, and once I'd worked out how far the fitting was going to stick out over the end of the wire, they recommend using a hacksaw. That was going to be way too slow for me. I just used a grinding disc, and then after I used the grinding disc, I very lightly just got off the burrs. Like, you don't want to lose any of your wire, so I very, very lightly just got off all the burrs. After that, you're putting on the end nut or piece, whatever it's called, and then you're opening up the outer strands of the wires. I was just holding on to this lower piece, so I didn't need to put any tape or anything around to stop it from sliding down the rope. Then you need to open the outer strand of the wires. They say you can do it one by one. I was getting a pair of vice grips, one of the two. And if you get the right amount of pressure, you can put like not too much pressure on, but not still a little bit. You can put it around the outside and go the way that the strands are turning, and it'll flick it open like a little flower. It'll look like a little flower. And once you've got that all open, make them all even again so they're not actually overlapping anywhere. So it always needs to look nice and even. Then you're putting what they call the wedge on, and the wedge goes on the inner core of the wire. The wedge is called a wedge because of its shape, and it's also got a little wedge taken out so it can close up. And then you're closing up. I'm just going quickly over these instructions because once you do one, you will not have to go back to the instructions. It's really, really simple. Once you've done that first one, you'll be like, sweet, I know what I'm doing, and then you'll start bashing them out. Yep, so once you've got the wedge on, then all the outer strands need to go up and over the wedge, and the wedge for Sta Lok fittings needs to stay 3mm from the top. And then you've got to make sure all those outer strands don't fall in that one slit of the actual wedge. Once I did that, on goes the end piece. Like, you screw on the end piece and I tighten that up to almost the correct amount of tightness. Then I was taking that off and just double checking everything looked good. Like, none of the outer strands had fallen into the little slit in the wedge, and also it all looked nice and even, and it was still 3mm. The edge of the wedge was still 3mm from the top. Obviously the former, they call it the former, which was always just stayed in the top part of the fitting. Then your fitting goes back on. Don't forget to put a little bit of the rigger that I got to double check all my work was telling me to use lanolin. So lanolin around the outside and everywhere that you want to sort of stop corrosion and that sort of stuff. And galling, the main thing was he was saying put it around the threads to stop the galling from happening. So yeah, then the end bit goes on, then you tighten it up, and then you put it all back on. So one thing that I did forget was make sure when you're doing your measurements and you're lying everything out, your turnbuckle is exactly halfway in the middle, so you've got the maximum amount of adjustment either way. We were getting them pretty close. By the end of it, we were maximum maybe a couple of mil out from being exactly the same length as the last one. So and then just reattach, and that's as simple as it is. Logistically, I did my running backstays first, because I don't use them at all yet, but I'm sure I will in the future, but not nearly as much. B, because they were smaller wire, so I felt like if I made a mistake it would cost less to fix that mistake. C, because I didn't need to get the length exactly right, because obviously it's running and the end of it connects to a rope. So I used those as my two little practice ones, realized it was very easy very quickly, and then I slowly but surely moved my way up all the way to my forestay inside the roller furler doesn't have any adjuster. So I felt like that was definitely the final exam for me. I felt like I needed to get that bang on, otherwise it was, yeah, because I'm not able to adjust. I'm not able to adjust the tension. I could probably adjust it a little bit with the backstay and pull the mast back a little bit, but that's basically it. So I really felt like up until that point, that was the final exam where I had to get everything perfect, and I dare say we did too. We ran into dramas in two areas. So apart from going up and down the mast 30 times, which was a logistical nightmare, and I also had pulleys and stuff to lower the lines down. If I didn't walk down the mast holding the other end, I had a pulley up there and I lowered it down. My dad helped me on the deck. So the two areas that I had trouble with was, one, getting some fittings out of the mast. So there is two stainless steel rods, I think one's 12 mil and one's maybe 20 mil, through the mast, which are for different parts of the standing rigging. They were a massive pain in the ass to get out of the mast and replace. Yeah, at one point I thought I was totally defeated, and getting the nuts off the actual thing was a massive pain in the ass as well. But eventually, with a bit of sleep and a couple of coffees, we ended up getting it done. But yeah, bashing a fitting out of your mast whilst you're up the mast and there's one or two stays missing, yeah, that wasn't a good feeling either. But there was that, but we got around that eventually. And there was also the forestay, which runs inside the furler, had little to no room to play. So I planned on attaching the two bits of wire with a whole heap of tape, but there literally wasn't enough room to put other than like one or two times with the tape around the wire, which didn't do anything at all. So basically we cut the inner core of one wire and the outer core of another one, and then we almost spliced them together so they looked the same, but it had no holding power. So after that I was basically pushing it through the roller furler of the forestay to try and get it out without taking the whole thing apart. And we almost got there. We got to the very last section of the forestay before it hit something and we needed to take it apart. It wasn't too much of a mission to actually take that apart. It's just you definitely want to avoid it if you can. So it's going to be much easier just to push your new line through, or find a way of pulling or pushing your line through without having to take the whole thing apart would be much easier. But we ran into trouble and just sorted that out as well, so it wasn't a massive drama. Also, with the forestay with no adjuster, I tied an extra guy rope on the top of the mast down to the bow of the boat, and as we loosened the backstay off, and then with a pulley with that line running to a pulley back to the winch, we also tightened that up and literally pulled the mast forward enough to where we could get the pin out of the forestay and get the whole thing off. So that's how we did that. We lowered the whole thing down with a pulley and a sort of a bridle sort of system, which I'd never done before, but that worked out a treat as well. And then once we replaced it all, we just reversed everything with the pulley, got it back up into the air and got it back on. I got a rigger to come out and double check everything that I had done, and also tension everything correctly. Like, that didn't cost me much at all. It cost me like $100 or something like that, which is definitely great peace of mind. I think in 6 months after he's done that, I'm supposed to get him back to re-tension and recheck everything. To be honest, I just don't think I will. I've got this loose tension gauge, and I figured out how to use it, and it's actually recommending me to tighten my shrouds up a little bit more than what the rigger actually did. So I'm going to be doing that, because like your shrouds, they obviously can't be over tensioned, but under tension I think is more dangerous than over tension. Under tension they're not doing anything. Over tension you might that's obviously going to lead to troubles as well. So you want the exact same tension, but yeah, I don't know. This Lou's guide is recommending me to actually tighten them up more than what he did. Now that I know exactly what I've got doing, and I've got this tension gauge, I won't be getting the rigger back at all. I can't see why I would need him. I can inspect my rigging now. I know what to look for, and if there is something wrong, I can replace any part on that rigging without having to get a rigger in and retighten it to the exact tension that I need with my little tension gauge. So I really don't think that I will be seeing a rigger anymore. Well, that's basically it. Yeah, I hope that you got something out of this video, and just don't forget to keep checking all of your gear up and down the mast all the time. Especially initially, I know that I was definitely nervous after going out sailing the first time, and knowing that everything I'd put together, that was a little bit of a daunting feeling. But yeah, time, and if you take your time when you're doing it and make sure you get it all right, and then from there you should be good to go. So do I recommend you doing this by yourself? I think if you have a way of getting up and down the mast, like I've said a couple of times now, all by yourself, and you've got mast steps, and you're willing to take X amount of days to do it all and go through that pain, I think it is a relatively simple thing for you to do. I definitely think you can do it. I think it's definitely a logistical project. So it's not skill. It takes time and a bit of problem solving and a lot of logistics. And then if you're willing to do all that, I reckon give it a go, because it was easy. Catch ya. And it really isn't that hard, is it?
Not really.
No, it's not that hard. It's just a process of making sure you're doing everything properly and getting the measurements right.
We'll write a book, Rigging for Dummies.
Rigging for Dummies. I'm pretty sure Sta Lok have already done it.